Here, that's only certain user accounts can run sudo. apt-get is your package manager. It's advanced package. I forget what the T stands for. But that first line basically says, go out and update the list of all the available software repositories that I know about. Find out what the latest version of every piece of software that they have on them is, so that I have a fresh index of the latest stuff. Then I say, okay, well, let's say I'm looking for Java, JDK. I would say sudo apt-cache search Java. And that will go through that list that was created by the first command, and it'll spit back, okay, these are all the different packages that I know about out there that have the word Java in their title or their description, their one-line description. And I can go through and look at that and say, okay, I really want OpenJDK 6 whatever. So I say, okay, sudo apt-get install and OpenJDK-6. And at that point, it will go out, it'll say, okay, let me find that. What other dependencies are there that you don't currently have installed? Do you want me to install those too? Yes. And it'll go out and install it all. It's very easy. There is a graphical version of all this. If you're running the desktop, there's something you can install called the Synaptic Package Manager. If you're familiar with Ubuntu, that's the standard one that's on Ubuntu. And you can do basically all these same sorts of things, but in a graphical manner. It'll give you a graphical list of what's available and let you search, things like that. Yeah?
I think before we can do that, we have to get network connections.
Well, yeah, I'm assuming that you have Ethernet plugged in. But,
just minor thing, but I actually forget about it.
Yeah, and one thing I will say, if you're using Ethernet and you're requiring static IP, you got to go and modify a file by hand, which is a pain. If you're using Wi-Fi, it's even more of a pain. There is a graphical interface for the Wi-Fi adapter built in on the desktop, but yeah, if you're having to do it from the command line, it's a nightmare. So I try not to use Wi-Fi if I can avoid it.
It's pretty happy if you're on a DHCP network, though.
Yeah, if you're on DHCP, you just plug it in and go, you're fine.
Well, I've tried plugging in one Wi-Fi adapter, and you pretty much have to have it plugged into the hard line first,
Right.
to get the drivers before
Right.
you can do that.
It depends on which one you use. The one that I had, or the one that I bought, the drivers were already installed and the racks began managed, so
Oh, okay.
I didn't have to do anything. I just had to configure, I'm talking about like configuring it for the Wi-Fi that you're trying to connect to. That was a nightmare.
The WEP and all that. The WEP and all, the WEP key and all that.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff,
WEP?
yeah.
Who uses web?
Yeah. WPA or PK, whatever it's called, yeah.
The key.
So the graphical, when you boot up for the first time, it lets you choose whether you want to boot subsequent build or boots into a graphical interface or just from the command line. I usually just do the command line. But if I'm in the command line and I want to get into the graphical desktop, I just have to type start X, and that'll launch the graphical desktop. Like I said, you'll notice that it'll feel kind of slow, like dragging windows around. It'll take a while, and sometimes you can even watch it paint the screen. Again, that's just because they haven't optimized the X Windows server for using GPU. So, what else do you guys really want to know? I know at one point there was a question about ROS, being able to run ROS on Raspberry Pi. I tracked down somebody who had actually built a Raspbian image with ROS on it, all the non-graphical pieces of ROS. Really, the only thing that you need for ROS that is graphical would be like the simulation environment and some of the debugging type tools. Anything you need as far as core interface capability to actually build nodes and do stuff, this will do. And I can give you guys this file if you want.
Can you put that on the Yahoo groups? Or is
File
a
is
zip it?
it's
Or
pretty big.
Put a link to it?
I can certainly do it.
Fussy on the size.
We'll figure something out. I'll figure out some way of getting it.
Put it on a Google account.
Yeah,
Dropbox
I'll
is
put it
your friend.
someplace. Yeah. I'll put it. I can put it on my school account or something.
What you said there's a lot of online resources, forums. What are the actual websites of where? Okay.
I threw this
Never
together
mind.
this morning. There's actually a Raspberry Pi manual that you can get if you just Google for Raspberry Pi manual and you'll find it. It's a
Okay. There's not
PDF
going to be
file.
like 5 different Raspberry Pi manuals. Is there like a certain? Is that?
No,
Do you know the
it's
author?
pretty much the official.
Okay.
There's a couple of books out there as well that have been published. It really just depends on what level of information you need. If you're completely new to Linux, completely new to the Pi, don't know anything, and want to learn, like, you know, or you want to give this to your kid and get them started in programming, that's probably a great manual because it talks about how to start doing programming in Sketch and in Python, how to do just, you know, make a card, an SD card image, things like that. I tend to go to the forums on the Raspberry Pi website and to this wiki a lot, elinux.org. It's an entire wiki for embedded Linux systems. So they've got sections on BeagleBone and Raspberry Pi and a bunch of the plug computers and a bunch of others. That tends to be a really good source, especially if you're looking for, like, I go to it every time I need to re-image a card because I can never remember the stupid command I have to do it from the command line on Windows or on Mac. So I end up going there and it's like, oh, okay, there's the steps. Boom, boom, boom.
Is this open source hardware? Like, are the schematics like Arduino?
Schematics are available.
Like, if we wanted to make our own plates to go on them, and
Yes, that information is available.
or wanted to make our own, I mean, I wouldn't, but
A lot of people were early on were like, oh, well, if it's open hardware, I can just make my own board. Why do I have to buy it from you? Well, A, it'll cost you a lot more than $35 to do, and B, good luck getting your hands on that Broadcom chip.
oh really?
They get it at cost because the people who started the foundation work at Broadcom.
Right.
Broadcom actually gives it to them at cost, because this technically is a charity. It's a charity to help encourage programming and education of computing. There's no way you're going to get that Broadcom chip. Broadcom absolutely will not sell it to you unless you are a corporate customer.
Somebody got one on Hackaday last week. They made
They actually got the chip.
made their own A.
Wow. I'm impressed.
They may have taken it off of something else that already had it on there.
Yeah, that's the thing.
The cheapest way to get one is to buy a three an ARPA.
Really hard.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's stacked up. It's RAM that's stacked on top of the processor. So, yeah.
So you can get the Gerber files or the Eagle file or
As far
something?
as I know, yeah.
Okay.
I know I've seen that listed
You
or
make
mentioned somewhere.
a plate. Lady 80's got the Pi plate. That's
In the library?
All the Eagle files for the Pi plate, shield, prototype and shield are available. So
Okay.
we've started using it down at FreeSci for access control of a few things. So we're actually, instead of taking the Pi plate, we're taking Eagle files for the Pi plate and going and building our circuit where the prototyping area was and putting all our stuff in there.
Nice. Yeah.
You might want to tell them what things they may have to buy in order
Yeah,
to get it running.
good point. You'll notice this is very bare bones. So to get started, at a minimum, you're going to need a TV of some sort. I strongly recommend an HDMI, like an HDTV. I picked one up at like a 20, I think it was a 20-incher at Best Buy for like $130, $140.
Woot always has different sizes for sale.
Yeah, just look around. I would suggest getting a TV rather than a monitor, just because that way you get the audio support out if you want to. You don't have to fool around looking up speakers or anything like that. If you have an older SD, standard def TV, you can use the composite, but realize you're going to have really crappy resolution, and you're probably not going to want to read any text on it for more than 5 minutes without going blind. You'll need a keyboard and a mouse, obviously. I would recommend hooking up over Ethernet if you can. If you can't, if you go to that elinux.org site, they have a list of known working Wi-Fi adapters that you can plug in. I think I picked mine up from Newegg for $10. So, and it's a tiny little. I mean, you can barely even see it in there. That's it. So, but like I said, if you're going to plug in anything more than pretty much a Wi-Fi adapter and a keyboard or mouse, you're gonna want a powered external hub. Has to be a powered external hub, cannot be one that doesn't have its own power supply. Even then, they tend to be hit or miss whether or not they're gonna work because of the USB issues that they've had. They're working on getting that fixed. They've made improvements. It's something about the way the Broadcom or the USB chip that they chose for the board, how it handles doing USB 1 traffic over like the USB 2 line or something. I don't know all the details about it, but that's kind of a pain in the butt. Obviously, you're gonna need an SD card chip from these guys. I recommend using Class 6. Like I said, you can use a Class 10. They've gotten better about those. The thing is, with Class 10 is designed for newer digital cameras, which typically write single large files at a time. So it's optimized for large file writes. Linux does everything as a file, so you're typically writing lots of small files. The older cards tend to be a little bit better in that regard. They don't have to write this huge chunk to be able to get everything in there. So I tend to use Class 6. The other thing is the power supply. I just kind of dug around with what I had, and I had this old iPhone power supply adapter, works fine. You'll need the SD, if you get one that's like this, where it's just a USB jack on it, you'll have to buy a micro USB to micro USB cable. You can get,
Here's one I got at Fry's.
yeah, just look around. You might even have one already at home from an old phone. So just look around. I digging around, I actually found 3 of them at home. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess I don't have to buy the adapter, I just have to buy the cables.
Adafruit's a great place to get peripherals.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Adafruit, if you go to that link on Adafruit, they have a whole list of stuff for the Raspberry Pi. They have Wi-Fi adapters, they have pretty much anything you can think of.
A lot of nice cases.
Yeah, and it's gonna work. They've tried it.
It's all tested.
The only other thing you really absolutely have to have is some way to actually plug this sucker into your computer to write the image file to it. I used just one of these little cheap SD adapters. I think I picked this one up at Fry's for like $9. So yeah, I mean, those are basically the things you have to get running. Anything beyond that, it's,
You might want to point out that adapter if they're using VGA.
Oh yeah, if you have a monitor that does not have HDMI or composite and you want to plug it in, Len found this or got this adapter. It's an HDMI to VGA adapter. And you have to be careful though. Where'd you get this one?
Micro Center.
Micro Center. I would, if you're going to do this, go over to Micro Center and get this exact one because you have to be careful. The Pi will not support. I'm surprised even this one works, to be honest.
Actually, I've seen other people. I've seen those advertised on sites as accessories for Pi.
Okay.
I just got lucky.
Yeah, either buy it from a place that says this will work with Raspberry Pi, or get this exact one that Len got.
Or has a
the
good
reason for
return
that is that
policy.
it will not work with some sort of unpowered jack, if I remember correctly. Like this is supposedly supposed to be powered. I don't know how you got this working.
Does that have a part number? Is there anything that looks similar to it?
Looks like an
This has
Apple
nothing
product.
on it.
Yeah, looks like an Apple
Right.
product.
Yeah, it looks like an Apple thing, but it's not.
How much was it?
I can't remember exactly. Somewhere between $25 to $35.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. You can very quickly.
Sounds like an Apple product, yes.
When we say, hey, it's a $35 computer, yeah, well,
So it's the
it is if
keyboard
you
and
have
mouse.
everything else already. If you need to go buy these other parts,
It's about
it gets
$60 at
expensive.
Walmart. You buy a monitor. It's got HDMI in.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Small PC screen HDMI.
I just bought a new TV and said the hell with it. It was much easier to just get a TV and have a dedicated setup for when I want to do
Yeah,
stuff on
sound
it.
too. I mean, you don't have need a speaker, and you can try a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
play videos and stuff like
Yeah.
games.
So,
I had a question on the forums. You said there's obviously a lot. is there a decent amount of people doing robotics with this?
There's an entire robotics section, yes.
Okay, so there is a lot
In
of,
fact, here, I'll go to it right now.
because I mean, a lot of people here are going to be interested in
Yeah,
the
no,
robotics
I understand.
portion of that.
There's people who've already done prototyping boards, boards that are robotic intent, that you plug into the I/O board.
Mm.
So they're already doing like effectively like a shield for the Raspberry.
Right, which those are called plates, right?
There's no official name. People
Oh.
call it
Plate or
whatever, yeah.
Python or something like that.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, there's 769 topics that have been running, 6,000, almost 7,000 posts to those topics, and yeah, I mean this is one of the more active forums I've ever been on online. There's just so much stuff that goes on, and they do a pretty good job of breaking it out to different kinds of stuff. Originally, it was everything was in general discussion in it. There'd be so many topics posted every 2 seconds. You couldn't keep up with anything. By the time you look at a forum or a thread, you go back to the main page. That's it. There's been so many posts just in the time you've been reading that the thread you were looking at is now on page 5.
Search is your friend.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Almost every topic has a post within the last few seconds.
Yeah, that's why I say it's a very, very active forum. As opposed to like the Panda board, there was no forum. It was a mailing list, and you'd be lucky if there were 5 posts on it per day.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I'm not going to get any help that I need to get this thing working with that little traffic. Every question I've ever had with this thing, I've been able to find an answer very quickly. So yeah,
You try to compile in C++ source code on it to see how fast it is.
I have actually compiled ROS on this thing, and it took me several hours. If at all possible, there's ways in Linux you can set up to do cross-compiling. So if you can set up a Linux box, if you've got another Linux box at home or something that's a much beefier processor, there's ways to set up cross-compiling so that you perform all the compiling on your beefy machine, but it's built in such a way as that it's ready to run on the Pi. It's compiled for the Pi's.
Essentially in the make file, you go and specify the target being the Raspberry Pi.
Right.
And assuming you've got all the libraries and all the other stuff, and there it goes and builds.
There
and
is some
you just
information on
copy it
how
over.
to do that, though. You can find info on how to do it.
It's usually going and setting up a cross-compile environment, assuming that you're doing it essentially from scratch using instructions. Takes a while, it's kind of a fussy pain in the rear, but once you're done and understand your build process, it just works.
Yeah, and it's much faster than trying to do it on the Pi. If it's something small that you want to build, I just do it on the Pi. Like anything you're building for your own stuff, I would just do it right on the Pi. Who cares how long it takes? Just set it up, let it compile overnight, and go. But yeah. Question, or can you not read something? Or is it
I'm
just-
trying to read that URL. How do you spell that?
Just raspberrypi.org.
RASPEB?
RASPBERRYPI.org.
Okay. Oh yeah, I did get it right, because I got a favicon that came up page not available.
There's a lot of stuff.
Sprint's helping out right now, I'm sure.
There's also little screens out there that you can plug in if you want a small screen tied into your Raspberry Pi. Even touch screens. People are playing around with touch screens where you interface the touch portion into your
Yeah, it has
port.
dedicated ports for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. The industry, the industrial world is starting to look at Pi as a source to replace touchscreens and PLCs right now. I've got a friend who's got one now. He actually uses his Pi at his main workstation and has his laptop plugged in somewhere else, and he remotes in through the Pi into his laptop to develop.
That takes a
Wow.
Okay.
That's kind of the reverse of what I would
Yeah,
suggest doing.
Well,
but
he does he's using that as a way to force himself to learn the Pi.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not bad.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, I guess that worked. I was wondering, why would you want to remote into a laptop if you're going to do something like that?
It's forcing them to learn.
But-
more portables.
I mean, there's people out there
Well, I don't know,
actually,
by the time you get the screen and the power.
There are
and
people
all-
who are crazy.
there are people out there that are actually making their own little portable pies. They'll just mount everything to a flat plate and cover it with with plexiglass, and like they, just carry it around on their arm or something with their own battery.
Yeah.
Call it a notebook.
I think we're talking about the next rev of Geek 3.0.
Surface.
So are you going to be is that what you're doing now, accessing the Pi?
So actually what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna flash the SD card with a disk image, just a standard Raspbian image. Just wanna make sure that I'm not deleting anything I absolutely need.
There goes that schoolwork again.
Yeah, I'll say that. Okay,
So do you have all your schoolwork saved off to Dropbox?
actually it's on my server at home, so.
Well, there's an interesting question. Is there a Dropbox for Pi?
One for Linux, so
It's just web-based, so, right? And Dropbox.
Well, you
web-based.
can do it web-based, but if you've got a native app, it becomes a lot nicer.
I haven't looked, to be honest. That's something else we can
That'd
look
be an
up.
interesting way to transfer things from your laptop to a.
Yeah, I use Dropbox
Raspberry.
as an SVN
Yeah.
between different computers. I can just open up my program.
Yeah, my friend who's doing that
I keep
remote,
all-
I
I
think
keep all-
he's using SSH, is it, or something like that?
SCP,
S-
which is basically the copy command over SSH.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can just.
So that's what I was using,
Sort of like FTP, only secure.
no, with Linux on the nav computer.
Okay. Oh, one other thing in the environment for the Raspberry Pi, it actually has two, it's not Windows, it's got two different screens. And there's a little button in the taskbar that you can press.
Oh,
and you
virtual
can-
desktops.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you got, two virtual
Yeah.
desktops.
We'll get to that in a second.
There's
All right.
two authentication keys out there for something to do with audio files that you have to buy separately.
Oh, okay, so
Oh, yeah.
they include the codecs for playing a couple of different audio and video formats. Some things are not like MP. I don't want to say MP3, like MPEG-4 or MPEG-2. Those actually have licenses associated with them. Now we usually don't worry about that in the Windows world because whoever like Microsoft usually buys a block license from the MPEG Association to include the codec for decompressing and playing that file format in Windows. In order to keep prices down and in order to make sure that, hey, not everybody's going to need this, so why should everybody have to absorb the cost? And because it was going to cost them a fortune to have to buy this gigantic block of license files or license keys, they basically said, okay, you know what, we're going to make it so if you want to be able to play that kind of file, we'll provide access to the codec, but you got to pay extra for it. And I think it's like $5 for each one that you want. Unless you're going to play that kind of file, there's no point in buying it. So, if you're using it as like a home theater PC type setup, and you've got files that are in that format, okay, drop the money, but it's tied to that specific board. So even if you take your SD card, if you got two different boards, take the SD card out of one and put it in the other, it's not going to play.
The WAV files, those WAV files.
Wave is a very Microsoft-based file format.
It's also a very, very basic,
Yeah, I mean,
it's basically a very small header that says
you can
how many
change
bits
that
per
to something
sample and then
else,
samples.
So no problem.
It's very big.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, no compression at all.
what I'm going to show you here, this is just how you do it on the Mac from the command line. There are some graphical tools you can download that people have made for doing this sort of thing. But basically all I'm doing here is I plugged in the little USB SD card adapter and plugged in my SD card, and I'm just going to tell it that I want to So I'm basically saying, okay, DD is the disk duplicator tool, which is pretty standard on most Unix systems. BS is the block size that I want to write out to the file system as. IF is the input file that I want it to read, and that's going to be equals Raspbian, or Wheezy Raspbian image. So this image was actually updated on December 16th of last year, so they tend to release new versions about once every month and a half. You don't have to download the whole new version and start from scratch. You can there's ways you can just update the version you have in place. So it's a little nicer than your typical Windows. Okay, I have to buy it and wipe the hard drive and start from scratch every time. And then I'm going to tell it the output file is oh crap, which disk is it? This one. Okay. And this will churn away for probably about 10-15 minutes, and
Time for break.
yeah, it's good. Actually, this would be a good time for a break if you guys want to take one.
Okay.
And while we're